dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, our guest will be Dr. Esin Şenol, an infectious diseases specialist at Gazi University's Faculty of Medicine. Dr. Şenol will be joining us to speak about Turkey's vaccination process, which began on January 14th. But first, let's take a look at Turkey's coronavirus patient table. According to the data provided by the Ministry of Health, the number of cases on January 14th was 8,962, while the number of deaths was 170. These numbers have led to the total number of deaths due to the coronavirus to reach 23,495, while the total number of patients has become 2,364,801. Turkey began vaccinating healthcare personnel against COVID-19 starting Thursday, January 14th, as the Health Ministry granted the emergency approval for China's Coronavac. According to the data by the ministry, Turkey will be vaccinating 1.1 million healthcare workers within the month.
Health Minister Fahrettin Koca became the first person in the country to receive the Coronavac vaccine, as his vaccination was broadcast on live television. I want to underline that everyone must be vaccinated. We must definitely get the vaccine to return to our normal daily lives. Following the minister, the committee members were vaccinated as well. Koca explained that by getting vaccinated, senior officials would be setting an example for the public to follow suit. Koca further detailed the process, stating that each individual will be assigned vaccine doses by name with a barcode. Koca added, "We're determined to administer the vaccine and comply with measures and restrictions until the pandemic comes to an end." President Erdogan was also vaccinated for COVID-19 on January 14 in an attempt to alleviate any public doubts over the effectiveness of the vaccine. The Health Ministry has announced that vaccinations in the country will be a four-step procedure. In the first step, healthcare workers, people aged 65 and above, and adults living in crowded places such as shelters will be vaccinated. In the next step, essential workers, people above 50 years of age, and those with at least one chronic disease will be vaccinated. In the third phase, people under 50 with at least one chronic disease, young adults, and those who have jobs will be vaccinated. In the final phase, all the remaining individuals will be vaccinated. Turkey has agreed to purchase 50 million doses of Sinovac's Coronavac vaccine and has taken delivery of an initial 3 million doses on December 30th. It has also agreed to procure 4.5 million doses of the vaccine developed by Pfizer and BioNTech, with an option to buy 30 million more later.
Good evening, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us on This Week in Turkey again. It's nice to have you.
Oh, hi. It's nice to be with you also.
Okay, so vaccination in Turkey began on Wednesday with Minister Koca and the Coronavirus Scientific Committee getting their first dosages, since President Erdogan has also gotten his vaccine, as well as healthcare workers across the country. So we've procured the Coronavac vaccine from China. And this is the vaccine that is being administered at the moment. So first, I'd like to ask you, Professor, what do you think of the choice of vaccine? There have been a lot of discussions regarding the Coronavac vaccine, regarding the phase 3 results, both in Turkey and those that have been reached in Brazil. Perhaps you can evaluate these results for us and tell us what are perhaps some of the remaining unanswered questions in relation to this vaccine.
It was an amazing day. First of all, I have to say, yesterday we started vaccinating a lot of healthcare professionals, healthcare workers, and they were, although they were hesitating, there were some hesitance regarding not the vaccination, but regarding the vaccine, as you said. But they were so willing to get the vaccine instead of getting the illness. So I was so happy. At least we have one vaccine to start to vaccination, because I was concerned that we are so late. We are so late because we do have effective vaccines in the world and we cannot reach them, and still people are dying because of an illness that's preventable with a vaccine. So I was happy at least we started vaccination, and I was also I was also happy about the willingness of the people for getting vaccination, and we just prepared our capacity shorter than a day, in a time shorter than a day. So I was happy seeing this also. We do have that capacity, infrastructure, so it can be expanded if we get the several vaccines and enough vaccine doses. But we do have still lots of questions, as you already mentioned that we just signed a deal with one vaccine, and that one vaccine was willing to be in the area by completing it is scientific data, but in the beginning they were willing to do this. They just completed the data as it happened to be completed, and they published their phase 1 and phase 2 results in a good paper, and we were just we were able to overview and see all the details, and we were filled with hope about that vaccine, that the only vaccine we just signed a deal, and while we were awaiting, the other vaccines was on the scene, and they completed their all data, and they were just applying for the authorization, and 2 of them got the authorization in a proper way that they have committed. So the whole world, at least for more than 40 countries started vaccinating their people according to a plan, and we were just awaiting for the results of the phase 3 studies of this vaccine, and they were in a hurry, I guess, and they just conducted several trials in several countries as it had to be. So countries started to release their interim analysis, premature interim analysis, respectively, which were not detailed, which were not in a proper way, which were not, with good sensitivity. So we were like, what's going on with this vaccine? And we were waiting for the results of all the studies, combination of all studies, and then Brazil first released their results as the effectiveness of the vaccine was 78% something, and then they revised their results that it was not 78%, it was 50%, which is very, which is very near to the effectiveness condition, that the World Health Organization and the other committees just set up for the vaccine to be approved. It was so close to that border. So we were like, we have to see the details of these results. We have to review all the details, and we have to see the decisions of the independent committees. So while we were awaiting them, Turkey just released the emergency approval authorization, which was very new for our country, which was just held like a month ago, and they just started. They stated that we will start with this vaccine, and this was the only vaccine for us. So we do have several questions regarding vaccine, not the vaccination. We strongly recommend that we have to vaccinate at least 80% of our population with 80% with a vaccine with 80% effectiveness, at least 80% effectiveness. Otherwise, we have to vaccinate more than this. So we are in shortage of supply of vaccine. We are too late, and we do have just one vaccine on the table.
Wow, thank you for summarizing that, Doctor. Now, you mentioned that we only have the one vaccine. And as a matter of fact, I mean, there is growing skepticism about the efficacy of this vaccine. And this is also compiled, I guess, with the general lack of trust towards the government's management of the pandemic as well. So there's already an environment of lack of confidence. And this is compiled with the skepticism regarding the vaccine. And now there are, I guess, rumors that the BioNTech-Pfizer vaccine is also going to arrive in a couple of months. Moreover, the results of these vaccine trials show different effects for different age groups and patient groups as well. So in this regard, why is it important for Turkey and any other country to increase the variety of vaccines that they have on hand?
First of all, we do have a population with the burden of chronic health conditions. In Turkey, people over 50 years old has at least one chronic health condition. 50% of the population over 50 years old had at least one chronic health condition. And when we just look at the data for the people over 60 years old, more than 60% of the 60 years old people have one or more than one chronic health condition. So we do have a high burden of chronic health conditions. First of all, this is our population demographics. And when we are talking about a vaccination issue, the most important determinant for the effectiveness of the vaccine is your immune response to the vaccine, which is given. So people with chronic health conditions and people over 60 years old may not give enough vaccine responses. So this is one of the main issues, because when we are talking about a pandemic and when we do have a high burden of pandemic, I mean, there are lots of people dying every day because of pandemic, and even young people are dying, but people with chronic health conditions and people at high risk conditions are dying more than everyone. So when we are talking about the issues for protecting the individual or protecting the community, we do have to be confident about the effectiveness of the vaccine. So when you are conducting studies for the vaccine efficacy, you are taking a population which is so homogeneous. I mean, they are between the ages of 18 years old and 60 years old. They can give enough responses to everything. They are less likely prone to die because of the illness. So this is a homogeneous population. You are talking about the efficacy of the vaccine in a very homogeneous and healthy people. So when you have to extrapolate these data, you should be confident about the effectiveness will not drop down below to the confident levels. So this is the issue. We do have a high burden of population that cannot give enough response to vaccine and also prone to die because of the disease. So we have to be sure about that. I mean, at least we have to extrapolate the data in a proper way. So you can never be sure in a pandemic about a pandemic vaccine, but you can be approximately, confident that the people will not die when they get the vaccine, and you will protect your population in a short period of time if you can vaccinate above the critical level that has been set for this issue. This is 60% of the population. When you vaccinate 60% of population, which is a big deal. We are witnessing that already, which is a big deal. It should worth that you will take out your population of the pandemic tunnel, and you will protect the individuals that who are taking the risk of working, who are taking the risk of being in the population just amid the pandemic. So I mean, you should use the scientific data, enough scientific data for extrapolating these kinds of data.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Şenol, I mean, you mentioned earlier that Turkey was already late in starting the vaccination process. We only have one vaccine on hand, and I guess the numbers that are ordered are only will only allow us to vaccinate a certain percentage of the population, which is not the percentage that is required to create some sort of immunity. So what do you think will be the route Turkey will take now? Will they be able to order some of the more efficient vaccines, or there is talk also of locally produced vaccines? What do you think will be the plan ahead of us in order to prevent this contamination?
In the beginning of the pandemic, institutions were aware that the countries might not be prepared enough. Mm-hmm. Insufficient preparedness was the concern for the institutions. So they just held a collaboration with World Health Organization, and they were just aware that this is a one world and one health scenario. At least the last person is not under the threat of pandemic. We could not be safe in this world. So they just established this collaboration, and it is open to every country. They just signed deals with different vaccines, which were promising regarding efficacy and regarding good manufacturing processes. So there are several vaccines that they just signed deals. So you can apply for demanding the vaccine. We cannot afford the vaccine, you can say this, or you can make a prepayment and you can sign a deal. So you can take several of these vaccines in a cheapest way. I mean, you can take them for good prices. So Turkey was just stating that in the last few months, I guess. We are getting prepared for appliance for COVAX, but I don't know what happened, and now they are not telling anything about this issue. So we can still get several other vaccines that are proven to be effective in different age groups and in different risk groups. So we can be sure, we can be approximately sure about the protection of the high risk individuals, and we can be fast enough to catch the pandemic rate by vaccinating with enough doses and with a good, efficient vaccine. Vaccines, I have to say, mm-hmm. Not just vaccines. There are several vaccines in the context.
Good. So there is a chance that Turkey can still make an agreement in order to procure these more effective vaccines. Dr. Şenol, so as we mentioned, the vaccination process began on Wednesday, and the Ministry of Health has announced a 4-stage vaccination process with different groups in each stage of the process. Do you foresee any problems in this vaccination process as planned by the ministry in terms of perhaps infrastructure or other types of problem that might occur in the process?
They established software for following up the adverse events, and as far as I see, as far as I witnessed yesterday, there are not concerning adverse events, so they could be manageable at least for the short term. But we have to follow the people for like 28 days for the adverse events, and for the efficacy of the vaccine, we have to run several tests afterwards, like antibody tests, because I think we need them, because we are talking about a vaccine which is supposed to be 50% effective. So we have to follow up these people, close follow-up. We do have to do close follow-up regarding the efficacy of the vaccines. Whenever they show the signs of the illness, we have to run the tests for the illness, and we have to run the tests for the efficacy. And regarding the second doses of the vaccine, 28 days, they set up the second dose appointment like 28 days. Now I have two questions regarding this. One is when they will come. I mean, the second doses of vaccines. Regarding the second doses of, when will the other part of the vaccine will arrive in Turkey? Shall we review them? Shall we inspect them? Like this part of the vaccine in 14 days, and will the time be okay for the second doses of the appointments, and so on. Now these are my questions for now, at least.
That's a very important point you underlined, Dr. Şenol, the 14-day inspection period that occurred before the first 3 million dosages arrived. And now we haven't gotten the second shipment yet, but the second vaccinations need to be conducted in 28 days. So if is there going to be a trial period or not? Yes, that is a question that remains unanswered. Lastly, Doctor, I'd like to ask you regarding the process ahead of us. So since November, as you know, there have been new confinement measures that have been taken in order to curb the peak of infection. And it looks like now we're getting results, and the number of daily cases are indeed decreasing because of these weekend confinements and so forth. So how do you evaluate our current state in the pandemic? And how will vaccination affect the time ahead of us in terms of measures to be taken for the wider population?
In the 2 months' time, we have to vaccinate at least 30% of our population as fast as we can do, with a good, effective vaccine, which has the effective efficacy data more than 80%. I mean, if you have a vaccine for the deployment with 80% efficacy, you have to vaccinate 30% of your population in the 2 months period. So it is so important, but it cannot replace the confinement strategies. It can never replace. We are just trying to catch the rate of the pandemic, and we have also that variant issue, which is growing the peak of the pandemic in the other parts of the world. So it is a threat for us also. We can see it in the next 2 weeks. I mean, this is a critical 2 weeks to 2 months time. So as you already said, we have some curfews, we have some mitigation strategies that we are allowing the pandemic in a low rate. we are allowing the spread of the disease in order to avoid the overwhelming of the health capacity. We are just trying to avoid the overwhelming of the health capacity, but we are allowing the transmission of the virus. So there are still lots of deaths, daily deaths, according to the official data. And it could not be acceptable, I mean, because we have a vaccine now for preventing these deaths, and we can be more strict on these confinement measures. I mean, the schools are still closed, which is so tragic, I mean, which is so sad. Because it is one of the main key areas of communities and life. So on the other hand, people which are responsible for most of the transmission events are going to workplaces, and they are coming to their home, and the household transmission is very high in Turkey. As the minister himself stated this, it is like 85% or something, which is higher than the other parts of the world. So we do have several issues, and we do have a burden of active cases still, which shows us that we are not controlling the source of the pandemic. We are just controlling the overwhelming of the health capacity. So whenever we just release these confinements, we will have a peak. It means we have the risk of having another peak, which the peak means that you are not having a high burden of pandemic. The peak means that you have a high burden of hospital admissions, and you have a high burden of deaths, which overwhelms the capacity of the health system. So it's like an unfortunate circle. It becomes like an unfortunate circle. So I bet when we release these strategies, release these confinements, we will see another peaks.
So even though we have the vaccine in the country and the process has begun, the measures, the confinement measures particularly, should still be followed for some time.
Yes, yes, for sure.
Yeah. Professor Esin Şenol, thank you so much for having joined us this evening.
Thanks a lot.
Protests against the newly government-appointed rector Melih Bulu at Boğaziçi University continue this week in Turkey, as students and faculty members continue to hold protests since January 4th. Students from other universities in Istanbul have announced their support, and the Republican People's Party Istanbul chair Canan Kaftancıoğlu joined the demonstrations this week.
On January 11th, students of Istanbul University announced that they were in solidarity with the students of Boğaziçi University. Istanbul University is also among the universities that received a newly government-appointed rector, Mahmut Ak. Similarly, students of Istanbul Technical University gathered at their campus in Istanbul's Maslak district on January 12 to show their support to the Boğaziçi student struggle. Reporting from the field, Şükran Şençekiçer provided Medyascope viewers a glimpse of the scene where both the south side and north side of Boğaziçi University campus is closed with barriers. No one is allowed inside the Hisarüzü district except the Boğaziçi students and residents of the district. As students are allowed on campus, they continue to hold protests. Along with the students, Boğaziçi faculty members regularly attend the protests, wearing their gowns and turning their back on the rectorate. The Boğaziçi faculty said in their declaration that the cancellation of rectoral elections with a presidential decree in 2016 is the continuation of anti-democratic implementations of the government. Since the 2016 coup attempt, Erdogan has been appointing rectors himself. As part of their protests, Boğaziçi students have conducted various activities to express their objection to the government appointing university presidents. They held book reading protests in front of the rectorate building. They held a forum where they talked about the future of the protests, and they conducted a resistance-themed open lecture through Ursula K. Le Guin's philosophical fiction story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. students said in a press statement that they will not stop protesting until Melih Bulu resigns from the position. The CHP Istanbul chair Canan Kaftancıoğlu was also among the people who supported the students' protest against the government. After Kaftancıoğlu participated in the protests, President Erdogan and Minister of Interior Süleyman Soylu attacked Kaftancıoğlu and accused her of being a supporter of terrorism. President Erdogan's statement came as following: "Why should I talk with the students? Students are not involved in this. Terrorists are involved in this." The CHP's Istanbul chair is also there. She is a DHKPC militant. In addition, Minister of Interior Süleyman Soylu also targeted Canan Kaftancıoğlu, framing her as a person with a militant spirit. Over this, Canan Kaftancıoğlu filed a criminal complaint against President Erdogan and Minister Soylu for mental anguish. Professor Dr. Zafer Toprak spoke to Medyascope and evaluated the appointment of Melih Bulu through the lens of university culture. Until today, every single one of our rectors have worked in the university's various stages and hierarchies prior to becoming the university president. This university was always administered through our professors who knew Boğaziçi like the back of their hands. This is a major advantage. We are a transparent university and we are academically competitive. Only the people inside the departments get to decide who will enter the department. Not even once in the past had there been someone appointed as the rector right from above. This is the tradition we stem from, and thus I am a professor who believes that this uniqueness must be preserved.
WhatsApp announced its new privacy policy on January 6th that enables the application to share user information with Facebook family companies. The users need to agree to the privacy terms in order to be able to use the application after February 8th. This created global criticism and backlash from both international users as well as from government officials.
WhatsApp users worldwide have been in a heated debate on whether or not to proceed with using WhatsApp after February 8th. In other words, agreeing to the new privacy policy. According to the company's official announcement, those who do not agree with the new data sharing policy will lose access to their accounts after February 8th. Sharing data with Facebook existed in the app for years as an option, but now the terms clearly state that WhatsApp receives information from and shares information with the other Facebook companies. We may use the information we receive from them, and they may use the information we share with them to help operate and market services. The company has faced a backlash from its Turkish users as well. In accordance, government officials in Turkey have sharply criticized WhatsApp and promoted state-controlled alternative messenger services. Ali Taha Koç, the head of the Presidency Digital Transformation Office, called the public to stand against WhatsApp's new privacy policy, which he referred to as digital fascism. Instead, he recommended the Turkish citizens to use Turkey-based messaging applications such as Bip and Dedi. As an alternative to WhatsApp, many government officials also advised Bip Messenger, developed by Turkcell GSM operator, chaired by President Erdogan. Another specific detail in WhatsApp's announcement sparked further outcry. The tech company obligates its users who are outside of the European Union and the UK to accept sharing data. These countries exempt from sharing their data with Facebook after February 8 infuriated WhatsApp users in the non-exempt countries. In Turkey, the Competitive Board and Data Protection Authority opened an investigation against WhatsApp on January 11. This inquiry is to designate whether WhatsApp's new privacy terms are violating Article 6 of the Law on Protection of Competition, which targets to prevent a company from abusing its dominant position in the market. Will Cathcart, the head of WhatsApp, responded to the criticisms, saying that WhatsApp conversations are end-to-end encrypted and that new privacy terms will not alternate companies' current data practices. Cathcart reiterated WhatsApp's data practices through Twitter, reminding that both Facebook and WhatsApp are not able to access users' chats as they are protected by end-to-end encryption. Technology expert Atif Ünaldı spoke to Medyascope regarding the policies behind the EU and the UK being exempt from WhatsApp's new privacy regulation. A short while ago, the European Union passed a new social media law through which they own the right to decide how the EU citizens' personal data will be collected and utilized through social media or through any establishments. Furthermore, they got in touch with Facebook and other social media platforms regarding this regulation. When we look at this current exceptional situation, we can conclude that because the EU's General Data Protection Regulation has terrific and protective regulations, as a result of this, the EU citizens never have to be concerned with the new WhatsApp privacy problem.
Facebook veya WhatsApp üzerinden
President Erdogan met with the European Union countries' ambassadors to Ankara at Çankaya Presidential Palace on Tuesday. During the meeting, Erdogan said that he wanted to improve relations with the European Union, stating that he expected the envoys to support turning a new page in Turkish-EU relations.
Addressing EU countries' ambassadors, President Erdogan said, "Just as our country's 60-year-long admission process is a strategic choice for us, the EU accepting Turkey as a full member will be an ontological choice in terms of the future of the Union. The uncertainty that has heightened with Brexit will be dissipated with Turkey taking its rightful place in the European family. We are ready to put our relations back on track," Erdogan told the ambassadors. "We expect our European friends to show the same goodwill." Erdogan on Saturday had stated that Turkey hoped to start afresh with the bloc in the new year, adding that interactions with the EU in 2020 were unproductive due to the artificial problems created by certain EU members. Other than the bilateral ties between Brussels and Ankara, 4 topics are expected to dominate the agenda: updating the migrant deal with the EU, visa liberalization for Turkish citizens, updating the customs unions with the EU, and Turkey's proposal for an Eastern Mediterranean conference. Turkey was subjected to serious injustice in Eastern Mediterranean and Cyprus, as we have witnessed the strategic blindness attitude, Erdogan said in his speech, adding that he hoped the region would be transformed from a competition area into a cooperation basin to serve the region's long-term interests. On Monday, the Turkish Foreign Ministry announced that the 61st round of the exploratory talks between Turkey and Greece will take place in Istanbul on January 25th, after a 5-year hiatus.
President Erdogan has filed a lawsuit against the main opposition Republican People's Party chair, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, after the latter called him a so-called president for targeting opposition media outlets. President Erdogan has demanded Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu pay 1 million Turkish liras in non-pecuniary damages.
Main opposition CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu held a press conference at the CHP central office in the capital city of Ankara on the occasion of January 10th Working Journalist Day in Turkey. In his speech, CHP chair Kılıçdaroğlu said that the press advertising agency fined 5 newspapers by cutting their public ads for 333 days because they reported true news. Kılıçdaroğlu continued his speech by stating, "If the press advertising agency turns into a press execution agency in a sense, we need to stop and think for a minute. What kind of democracy and media do they want to create?" Again, in 2020, if the so-called president of a country can directly target a newspaper and say, "I don't read that newspaper, don't buy or read that newspaper," just think about the tutelage and pressure on the media in that country. Following Kılıçdaroğlu's remarks, Erdogan's lawyer Hüseyin Aydın announced on January 11th that they filed a lawsuit based on the grounds that the president's honor, reputation, and respectability had been violated and his personal rights had been severely damaged. The lawsuit demands that Kılıçdaroğlu pay Erdogan 1 million liras in non-pecuniary damages. In response, Kılıçdaroğlu vowed to launch a counter-lawsuit against Erdogan. He filed a lawsuit for a compensation of 1 million liras. "I am filing a lawsuit for a compensation of 1 lira," Kılıçdaroğlu said on January 12th. According to Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır, "We are witnessing a dispute caused by a certain kind of terminology. When looking at reasons cited by both parties for this occurrence, we can see that neither side cites any reason which is relevant to the current and vital issues of the country. There isn't any direct link. This discussion does not pertain to the essential problems of Turkey. But then why is it garnering so much interest? The authorities need to make a big deal out of such situations in order to position themselves as victims in the eyes of the public." Erdogan wants to turn Kılıçdaroğlu's remark, "so-called president," into Turkey's most pressing issue. He is using the situation in order to test the loyalty of ministers, political leaders, MPs, columnists, media owners, and so forth. Indeed, it can be seen that all these people are using social media as well as traditional media to denounce Kılıçdaroğlu's words and reiterate their allegiance with the president.
Cult leader Adnan Oktar was sentenced to 1,075 years and 3 months in prison for crimes including forming and leading a criminal gang, fraud, and sexual abuse.
Islamic television preacher Adnan Oktar first came to public attention in the 1990s, where he was a leader of a cult that was caught up in multiple sex scandals for which Oktar was acquitted. His online A9 television channel began broadcasting in 2011. Adnan Oktar preached creationism and conservative values, while women in revealing outfits dubbed kittens danced around him to upbeat music. Oktar rejects the Darwinian theory of evolution and has written a 770-page book called The Atlas of Creation under the pen name Harun Yahya. Oktar was detained in 2018 along with 200 other suspects following allegations of sexual abuse and kidnapping of minors. They were kept in custody during the trial. Oktar and 13 other high-ranking members of his group were in total sentenced to 9,803 years and 6 months in jail. Oktar himself was sentenced to a total 1,075 years and 3 months in prison on 10 counts, including founding and leading a criminal organization, political and military espionage, and aiding US-based Islamic cleric Fethullah Gülen, Ankara's top suspect for the failed coup attempt of July 15, 2016. Oktar was also convicted of sexual abuse of minors, sexual abuse, holding a person against their will, torture, interruption of the right to education, recording personal data, and threatening others. Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır evaluated the arrest as follows. Like all religious cults in the world, money, luxurious consumption, and sex were an integral part of Oktar's cult. With money and sex, and even blackmail at times, this cult tried to influence or even buy important people. This is a cult that derived its power from its relation with the authorities. But a political decision was taken, and this cult has been eradicated. So this was a cult that derived its legitimacy through its relations. For example, Adnan Oktar and his team were very effective in the success of Tayyip Erdogan's election as mayor of Istanbul during the local elections of 1994. In the general elections of 1995, they provided support to the Welfare Party. What type of support do they provide? Well, they would procure cars with chauffeurs to the candidates and ensure other financial eases.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.